Good afternoon, Madam President. Madam President, I stand for the purpose of just a few questions to the proponent of the bill.
Please proceed, sir.
Thank you, Madam President. Senator Bai, thank you for your hard work on this very challenging document before us. Clearly, it required an awful lot of discussions behind the scenes. I do wish, frankly, that my leadership team was invited to those discussions. But having said that, I heard in a discussion with Senator Kaine with reference to Section 58 to 71, a new program being put in place through CHRO. I thought I heard you say that CHRO plans to implement this program within current available appropriations. Did I hear that correctly through you, Madam President?
Senator Bai.
Yes, Madam President, through you.
Senator McLachlan.
Thank you, Madam President. And through you, Madam President, it's my understanding that the document before us has included for the next 2 fiscal years approximately $970,000 per year to add 11 more positions to CHRO. Am I missing something through you, Madam President?
Senator Bai.
Through you, Madam President, what I described to Senator Kaine was that we passed additional positions within...
Senator McLachlan.
I'm sorry. Through you, Madam President, to Senator McLachlan, as I explained to Senator Kaine, we passed some dollars in the current budget for CHRO for additional positions. And in the fiscal note, it describes those on page 6 of the fiscal note. Public Act 15244 appropriates $770,000 in both years. Through you, Madam President.
Senator McLachlan.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Senator Bai. I think the fiscal note probably also referenced costs for benefits, and I believe that the total amount brought us to just under $1 million a year for these 11 positions. And so thank you for the answer to that question. I appreciate that. Madam President, this frankly is one of the examples, though small in the big picture, where this legislature insists on creating a new $1 million a year program of new state employees, 11 new state employees, that will cost $88,000 per year per new state employee. And we're putting an unfunded mandate on all municipalities in Connecticut. And actually, it's 175 entities that are going to have to participate in this new program. And the fiscal note leaves a very big question. What is the cost to the local municipalities and the agencies that will be subject to this new program? Well, here, let's use a little common sense to calculate what that cost might be, because the fiscal note doesn't really tell us. If each community must have some administrative officer keeping track of this particular requirement for construction contracts, let's just say if the state needs 11 new employees at $88,000 a year, that the 175 municipalities and agencies that will be new to this program will need one. Just one. State needs 11, those municipalities need one. Times $88,000 a year, times 175 is $15.4 million a year to administer on a local level. Add that to the $1 million that the state's going to spend, and we have a new program that costs $16 $6.4 million a year. And here's the mind-boggling part of the discussion, that this has been discussed ad nauseum in the Government Administration and Elections Committee, and this bill, similar to this bill, passed out of committee on a very close vote. But here's the problem, and this has been my point in this topic of discussion since I arrived at the state capitol in 2009 as a member of the state Senate, that this legislature has to undertake a thorough disparity study to determine what's the appropriate course of action in this regard. We're only approaching phase 2 of the disparity study, and for some reason, we can't seem to get to the next step in that process. That's what we need. Tell us what the right direction is, and if that report tells us that you need to spend $16 million a year for new employees across the state, well then so be it. But you're going out and spending $16 million and we don't even have the direction yet. There's no plan. And furthermore, the current administration of construction contracts for CHRO compliance are currently handled by the Department of Administrative Services. And this bill says we're going to dump 175 new agencies and all their contracts into CHRO. Well, they've never done that before. You're just going to wave a magic wand and make this all happen in 3 months? Don't count on it. That means your contracts are going to get hung up. So this is just one example of we can't seem to walk before we run. And it is an ill-advised, ill-conceived idea to lump into the implementer bill. Implementer is apparently, long before my arrival, was almost purely technical. And we've gotten far, far away from operating that way here at the state capitol. The Connecticut Conference of Municipalities raised a whole different issue about this. In their email to legislators this morning, said, yes, it's an unfunded mandate to municipalities, but they have a far greater concern about legality, and their concern that we're expanding a program that may not be defensible. And that's what that disparity study is about. We need the disparity study so that we can fine-tune our set-aside program in Connecticut with some results from that study and tell us what's the right path to take. I have another problem with sections 443 and section 451 to 454, which are adding election monitors. Now, I may have missed some discussion somewhere along the way in the Government Administration and Elections Committee, but we've not had a public hearing on this topic. And once again, we're just sort of pulling this idea out of our back pocket after the legislative session is over, and you're going to spend, well, this is only $150,000 a year. Only. What's it for? Why didn't we have a public hearing? The lockbox for transportation is sort of the buzzword these days. Sounds good. Back in 1992, the voters of Connecticut, 81% of them, thought that a statutory or a constitutional spending cap was a great idea in Connecticut. So 81% of the voters said, yep, we want that, because now that you've given us a state income tax, we've got to keep the reins on the state capital and how much money they're spending. 23 years later, the legislature has failed to fully implement the constitutional spending cap called for by 81% of the voters of Connecticut in 1992. So today, we have a statutory lockbox for the Special Transportation Fund. And in the wings, we're hearing comments from the governor, legislative leaders, myself included, who think that there should be a lockbox on the Special Transportation Fund. Do you know that the language in this bill today is expanding how much money can be spent in the Special Transportation Fund that actually doesn't fix roads? The language in this bill today says that boating enforcement is now transportation. Boating enforcement. Now, I represent communities around Candlewood Lake, and we would love to have more enforcement officers from deep on Candlewood Lake. But that's coming out of the Special Transportation Fund? You know, the residents of Connecticut think the Special Transportation Fund might fix a pothole or a rusty fallen down bridge, or maybe help add a lane to a busy highway. We know we need a lot of work here in Connecticut. So it's a good idea to put a lock on the Special Transportation Fund. And so we have this statutory framework of the Special Transportation Fund. But we just opened up another little hole in the box. So why do we say one thing and do another? It is frustrating. It is frustrating. Madam President, Senator Kelly and Senator Formica so eloquently told us all about their constituents and how desperate they are for leadership at the state capitol in fiscal matters. I understand that this implementer language today makes some changes to the budget that was passed on June 3rd. But it doesn't go far enough. It's just sort of scratched the surface. A little bit here, a little bit there. Throw a few more dollars at the hospitals. We've still got all kinds of layoffs down the road. Postpone the agony of unitary tax to corporate Connecticut. What does that mean? That one of those companies that's looking for a new home is going to wait a little while? I don't know. A few extra dollars for nursing homes that don't have unions? You know, there's concern there, too, that the funding formula of money to nursing homes that have a union versus not having a union might not stand up in court. That's sort of common sense. That's an inequity if I ever saw one. Madam President, we need desperately to get back to basics in state government. We've gone way beyond that. We've gone way beyond the basics. And frankly, this building is not listening to the residents of Connecticut. Now, we even heard stories this morning of one of the members of this circle whose phone rang off the hook from people that weren't even in his district. That happens to me all the time. I often get emails and phone calls from people that I don't represent. I try to respond to them and forward them to their elected legislator. But people are really upset because they don't believe that elected officials in this building are in touch with reality of what's going on the street. My career outside of this building is in commercial real estate. And when I talk to my clients, potential clients, and people in the business community, their greeting is followed by shaking their head saying, "What are you thinking about in Hartford? Why? Why aren't you listening to us, Connecticut General Assembly? Please," is what they're saying. "Please, Mr. Governor, cut it out. When do we get a break?" Well, it's not today. It's not today, unfortunately. So, here we are again. A terrible tax increase, lack of leadership, and I'm frankly running out of things to say to my constituents what to do next. They melted down the switchboard at the state capitol. Apparently, they're still doing that. They've written emails. They've showed up at town hall meetings. And here we are. This morning, I read probably half a dozen responses to an email message that I sent out to my constituents late last week. And at least a half a dozen of them that I noticed this morning were saying, "Mike, I called the governor's office, but is anybody listening at the state capitol?" That was the gist of their message to me this morning. So all I can tell them is keep calling. The question is, are they going to remember on Election Day what happened? Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, sir.